from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Ian Collins.
And good evening. Busy one tonight, coming up later.
Freedom, tolerance, respect for the rule of law, belief in personal and social responsibility, and respect for British institutions.
Remember him? But what exactly are British values? We'll look at that a little later, plus this.
The failing of democracy, low pay, 0-hour contracts, the guise of austerity. If you're not out protesting at the moment, why are you not out? Because there's so many things that you should be protesting about. How
we mocked the Million Mask March people for their anti-capitalist, anti-corruption in politics theme. But could it turn out they were right all along, particularly in the wake of this week's events? But we start here.
When it comes to paying taxes, there's one rule for the super rich and another for the rest of us.
And of course, we're cross live to the United States for the latest on the shooting in Texas. We know the President has made remarks on this so far. Simon Marks is our US correspondent. We'll speak to Simon in just a little while and get the latest on that. 0345 6060 973. We're broadcasting, of course, live on Facebook, which means we're essentially on the telly. If you go to facebook.com/LBC, that's where you'll find moving pictures of the first section of this programme. Facebook.com/LBC. Now, the Queen avoiding tax? Question mark. Is this conclusive proof that we are right to distrust the establishment? What a week it's been, by the way, and we're going to sort of encapsulate quite a lot of themes from the last few years, I guess. This has sort of been building the last week or so in Westminster for different reasons, but our trust in our political masters, our trust in the establishment appears to be waning, not by the day, but by the hour. And then today we hear of something called the Paradise Papers, a huge new leak of financial documents revealing how the powerful and very, very wealthy, including the Queen, secretly invest vast amounts of cash into offshore tax havens. Donald Trump's Commerce Secretary is shown to have a stake in a firm dealing with Russians sanctioned by the US, I should say. We have rock stars and all manner of the super rich in here as well. The Paradise Papers contain 13.4 million documents, mostly from one leading firm in offshore finance, and nearly 100 media groups have been investigating the papers. So let me just throw the initial question. Is this conclusive proof that we are right to distrust the establishment? We've forever argued about people who squirrel away money, but perhaps in some respects we've maybe isolated that into a small, significant, but a small group of very, very wealthy billionaires that, whilst unsavoury, aren't particularly representative of the rest of us. But this is the head of state. And if the head of state is lobbing cash into offshore accounts, what does that tell us? 0345 6060 973. Lines are open now. Let's get more on this from Will Fitzgibbon. Will is senior reporter at the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists and has been working on this story for the past year. Will, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening. Good to be here.
This has been the culmination of, well, I mean, to say hard journalistic graft, I guess sort of understates it a bit.
It's been the most complicated thing I and many others of us have done by far.
13.4 million documents. Who's trawled through that lot?
About 400 journalists have been looking through this Paradise Papers documents for the past year or so. We're talking 7 million documents or so from one of the world's most prestigious offshore law firms, and we're talking millions of other files from business registries in some really closed-shop tax havens. We're talking Cook Islands, Vanuatu, the Bahamas, Malta. All of these giving us individual snippets and, in some cases, quite detailed information about what wealthy or politically powerful people and companies are doing out of plain sight.
I clearly wouldn't dream of asking you for a source on this, but people are bound to wonder how this information came your way.
ICIJ received always shared this information with our German partners, Süddeutsche Zeitung, who were also at the origins of the Panama Papers. And that's all we can say about it at this stage. We've got the information, we've been trawling through it responsibly for a year, and I think there are some important stories that will continue to come out of it.
What has made this more significant for you? Is it the amount of people on it? Is it the kind of people that are on this list?
The Paradise Papers really takes it up a notch in terms of offshore clients that we're seeing, and that's why you see companies like Apple, that's why you see clients like the Duchy of Lancaster. This is a law firm, the Appleby law firm, that forms the heart of the Paradise Papers leak, that really caters to the most powerful, the wealthiest and the most profitable companies.
And does this go across the board here, Will? I mean, I mentioned the British head of state coming up in these papers, which I think will cause a lot of rumbles in the United Kingdom. I alluded to rock stars and the like, big corporations. Is it a kind of heady mixture of all of the above?
It is. The offshore world, as we at ICIJ have known for years now, based on previous reporting, is a universe that has a strange tendency of bringing together celebrities, sports stars, politicians, both clean and dirty, and corporations whose very items we've probably got in our pocket as we speak, or certainly have in our homes.
The response that usually comes back when people have been put under scrutiny after it's been discovered they are sending money offshore is that firstly they've done nothing wrong, and invariably they didn't realise where their money was going. Somebody else was dealing with it.
They are legitimate points to make to a point, I would say. My first response would be, how can anyone say that what they're doing is legitimate when, by its very nature, nearly all of these transactions are secretive? And even within the hours since Paradise Papers has been published, governments from the US to Australia have already started to say an investigation is needed. And I think that just shows you that the blanket response, this was all legal, doesn't necessarily fly. In relation to your second point, I would say that not knowing where your money is going is in some ways at the heart of some of the problems with the offshore industry. Why is it that a wealthy person's money, let alone a politician's money, can be moved through this subterranean offshore universe and end up in places where they didn't intend it to or know it would?
There's maybe bad PR for rock stars, monarchs and huge conglomerates, but the bottom line, which you alluded to, is that whilst it may be unconventional, Will, according to the law of the land, nobody's going to jail here because no laws have been broken.
Well, I think that's too early to say. We heard similar things after Panama Papers, and there have certainly been plenty of investigations, audits and arrests since then. I think now that some of the information has been released, and remember, we're only a few hours into this, and there'll be more stories coming in the days, weeks and months that follows, it's now pretty much in the hands of, eventually, government officials, investigators, police, tax authorities, to start looking at this information, querying it as some of them already have, and deciding where they go to from here. Because ultimately the offshore world is something that exists because politicians, governments and those in power have decided that it hasn't yet been time to reform it, and each of these leaks, I think, moves a step further towards making that non-reform position harder to maintain.
Has there been a company or an individual that has perhaps shocked you more than others while investigating this?
I've been surprised by just the global spread of this. We're talking about the Duchy of Lancaster appearing in the Paradise Papers, but also the Foreign Minister of Uganda, and also family members from Indonesia's former dictator, Suharto. And as many times as I do these big leak projects, I'm just always re-surprised by how many names and how wide the names are.
The fact that the Queen is there, was that a surprise to you?
That was a surprise, and full credit to the Guardian reporters who found that in the first place and shared it with ICIJ and their partners. The Duchy of Lancaster is an entity that straddles a balance between publishing certain information but not very much information about its investments, and certainly not its offshore investments. So the ability through these leaked documents to see where millions of pounds of the Duchy's investments were going was a fascinating and unique insight.
This is kind of day one, Will. Are we looking at a trickle-out effect over the next week or so? Are you going to be releasing, or others releasing, more names and companies over the coming days?
Absolutely fair to say that there are many more important stories coming. Today was just the first salvo, if you like, and there'll be lots of really important stories about companies, about powerful people that are published in the United Kingdom by ICOJ and by newsrooms across the world. Don't forget that this is a kind of project in which 67 countries and media organisations from 67 countries have been working, and they've each got their important stories to tell.
Will, thank you for your time, sir. I'm sure we will speak again on this. Will Fitzgibbon, senior reporter at the International Consortium of Investigative Journalists, has been working on this story for the last year, along with many others. In a few moments' time, we'll have a chat to Joe Morm, who's an analysis, a tax specialist analysis. That's the correct terminology, isn't it? It was in there somewhere. Who will explain a little more about this strange balance between what some see as immoral, some see as illegal, what the law of the land says on this. I should say the Duchy of Lancaster, which provides the Queen with that income, said there's nothing illegal in the investments, no suggestions the Queen is avoiding tax, but questions may be asked about whether the monarch should be investing offshore, of course. Your thoughts on that? I think this goes right to, I think this one headline of all the others that may be in there, and we're going to see names, and many we will recognise, others maybe from other countries that we're not so familiar with. We'll see corporations, but in fact, the fact that that our own head of state, or the estate of our head of state, is seen to be avoiding tax is, as far as I can see, absolutely huge in terms of its significance. This is our most senior person in the country. I've never believed they specifically have to lay out a template of morality. I think that ship for the Royals sailed years ago. But there is something that should sit chronically uncomfortable with all of us when the head of state is sending money abroad to avoid paying tax. 0345 6060 973. Don't go away, Harry. Mark as well with you guys shortly, and Joe Morm, tax specialist, with us on this on LBC next.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Parents and anti-surveillance campaigners have urged a secondary school to rethink its decision to install CCTV in pupils' toilet areas after reports that some children were too scared to use them. Nick is in Hillingdon.
Now we are being asked to get involved in placing of those cameras, getting the children involved in the design and getting parents involved in workshops.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast.
With Hampton by Hilton. Book direct for the lowest price.
Every weekday morning from 7, only on LBC.
Antibiotics, we're wonderful pills, but don't ever think we'll cure all of your ills. So every time you feel a bit under the weather, don't always think that we can make you better. Take us for the wrong thing, that's dangerous to do. When you really need us, we can stop working for you. So please don't end up paying the price. Always take your doctor's advice.
Taking antibiotics when you don't need them puts you and your family at risk. Take your doctor or nurse's advice and keep antibiotics working.
The DVLA can spot an untaxed car a mile off. So, whether you're from Sutton-on-Sea and drive an SUV, or East Ham and own a white van, the fact is we have the records of over 37 million vehicles on our database. So if you haven't taxed your car, we'll find it. Tax it or lose it. Go to gov.uk/DVLA/tax it now.
Hey, you alright?
Yeah, I'm stuck in traffic. Where are you?
I've just got to Heathrow.
Already?
Yeah, I came on the Heathrow Express. It only takes 15 minutes.
Oh.
I'm heading to the lounge for breakfast. I was just calling to see if you wanted to join me.
Oh, I don't think I'll make it in time.
Okay, meet you at the gate?
Get there sooner with Heathrow Express. Just 15 minutes from central London to Heathrow. Book now at heathrowexpress.com. Terms and conditions apply.
I like my telly how I like my coffee. Strong, fast, and packing a punch. A bit like Sky One. Because when it comes to telly, I need it instantly. Super fast, straight to the brain. Just like that. Drink one, Sky One.
Drive a new Jeep Renegade right now and fuel your adventures wherever they take you. With £1,000 of free fuel plus £2,000 deposit contribution available on a Jeep Renegade. Find out more now at jeep.co.uk.
PCP sales until December 31st, 2017. Representative 4.2% APR. Minimum 14% customer deposit. 10,000 miles per annum subject to status. Jeep Financial Services. Free fuel T's and C's at jeepfuelyouradventure.co.uk.
From the elegant palazzos of the aristocratic port city of Trieste to the tiny narrow streets and stacked houses dug into rocks in Matera to the gently rolling hills of Le Longhe in Piedmont, famous for Barolo and white truffles, and the grand piazzas of Catania overlooking majestic Mount Etna. Italy is the perfect short break destination at any time of the year. See, taste, discover authentic Italy. For inspiration on where to visit on your Italian short break, go to italia.it.
Late Nights with Ian Collins on LBC.
Just a couple of quick texts here. This from Richard in Chelsea. Says anyone who pays 1 penny more in tax than they're legally obliged to is a first-class idiot. That is very true, although I'm pretty sure this kind of perhaps comes under a slightly different category. Sam in Belfast says, Nick, not sure who Nick is, the Queen is head of state in the Caymans, so why shouldn't she invest as their head of state? If it's done in that spirit, in order to build new motorways and the like for the Cayman Islands, then fine. I don't think it is. And Patrick says, after these revelations, are you still going to support capitalism? Why not support the Corbyn revolution, lad? Let's see no more Corbyn bashing from the likes of you. This isn't about capitalism. This is about capitalism gone wrong. That's the difference. That's kind of like saying that, I don't know, Stalin is a great representation of what Corbyn is trying to do. These kind of things, banking crisis, are capitalism gone wrong. If you can show me a socialist stroke Marxist system that has pulled as many people out of poverty as capitalism, then I'll support Jeremy Corbyn. Simple as that. 0345 6060 973. This is the revelations in what's called the Paradise Papers, a new huge leak of financial documents revealing how the powerful and very, very wealthy, including the Queen's private estate, invest vast amounts of cash into offshore tax havens. How does it work? What is the status of these things? Let's get more from Joe Morm, QC, tax specialist. Evening to you, Joe.
Evening, Ian.
This one has been rumbling along for, well, as long as I've been alive, hasn't it? What's the legal status of a tax haven? Can anyone invest? Are they allowed to do it? Is it immoral? These questions never really seem to go away.
They don't. And the answer to all of those questions typically is we don't know. I mean, it's terribly, terribly difficult to look at one or two documents and tell from those documents in isolation, a sort of snapshot of past someone's financial affairs, exactly what their behaviour is. Is it unlawful? Is it illegal? Is it morally wrong? It's very, very difficult to know. What we can do is we can look at the reasons why people use tax havens, and sometimes they are to avoid or evade tax, sometimes because they don't want anyone to know what assets they hold. Sometimes it's because the laws that apply in those tax havens are laxer than the laws that apply here, and so that they're engaging in a kind of regulatory dodging. And sometimes it's because they want to put assets beyond the reach of their creditors. Now, you can't really unpack which of those reasons obtain in the case of a particular individual, but you can know that none of those reasons are particularly great reasons. They're not sort of reasons you want to tell your vicar about.
Yeah. One of the things that I suppose, one of the equations that's often made is that if you know, lots of people politically, if they're on one part of the political spectrum, will sort of add up roughly what they think is squirreled away in tax havens and offshore accounts, and then do the sums that, well, if you transferred all that money back into the UK economy, we could solve the national debt and build 1,000 hospitals around the country. But I'm sure it wouldn't be as simple as that, would it? If you close them all down, that money wouldn't automatically transfer back here?
These answers are answers that come from a world of theory, which I think is basically what you're putting to me. Certainly the world would be a much, much better place if we didn't have tax havens. I don't think there's any sensible room for doubt about that. The real complexity arises when you stop to ask the question, well, what can we do as a country about it? We have lots of tax havens, and many of our tax havens are amongst the worst in class. And that's why back in 2014, David Cameron promised that he would shine a light on their affairs. He would force them to become much more transparent. After the general election, you and I know politicians have a habit of doing this. He didn't actually follow through on that promise. But it's certainly true to say that someone needs to provide leadership here. And speaking for myself, I think it would be a very good thing indeed if the Conservative Party delivered on those promises that it made back in 2014.
To your knowledge, Joe, could a government simply say, right, from January the 1st, we're closing all of these down?
These countries, these tax havens, are most of them British overseas territories or dependencies. They're little sort of remnants of when we had an enormous empire. And fundamentally, we do have the power to legislate for them. We have an absolute right to do it. We can deliver on those promises. Of course, the reality is that if we were to do that, we would have some positive effect on the propensity of people around the world to dodge tax. But the really bad people would probably move to another tax haven. And the reason why I think it's the right thing to do anyway is that if we do it, we can then put pressure on others to do it. But at the moment, there's this system, there's this situation where we all say, well, if no one else is going to do it, we're not going to do it. And fundamentally, the only way through that is for someone to show leadership like Cameron and Osborne promised back in 2014 and 2015.
Could that be Theresa May's revolution, which she needs so badly, of course? Joe, thank you for your time, sir. Joe Morm, Specialist Tax QC. Your thoughts on this, 0345 6060 973. By the way, we are going to get into the whole ethos of capitalism, whether it has failed, in the next section as well. Joey says, tax avoidance isn't capitalism gone wrong, it's a good thing. Shame on you for saying otherwise. Didn't say that, Joey. I didn't say that tax avoidance is capitalism gone wrong. I'm talking about the obscene use of tax havens, which I don't think anyone with a straight face could say comes under the spirit of your legal right to avoid tax. I think we could have a fairly reasonable debate on that point. Shah is in Woolwich. Hello, Shah.
Hello, hi there.
How are you, sir?
I'm very well, sir. Thank you so much. So good. I was just obviously, hearing your show. Great show. I'm a regular listener of your show. So a couple of points, please, grab from me. So firstly, we were talking about if the ICIJ investigations have had an impact and a positive impact. I can certainly say that we've seen some cases. So the Prime Minister of Pakistan was actually dismissed from his position on the basis of the ICIJ leaks, and then obviously there was an investigation, and the investigation showed that country's wealth was actually exported out of Pakistan. $4 billion were exported out of Pakistan in the form of these tax havens and these companies. Wow. And obviously the head of state had the interest in it, and it was a big story just recently, and now they've appointed a new prime minister, but that's also very subjective. So a couple of things that I wanted to speak, because I've worked within the financial crime space here as well, within Europe. I think the regulation really needs to have a more stronger view. So I heard that on the last call you were asking that if the head of state can say from tomorrow that, listen, it needs to stop. Yes, it can. But what we really need is the less of the bureaucracy and more of actually action. We know that our government is actually now losing the money as well. There are other governments in the world that are losing money. And collectively, I think it's having a very sort of the negative impact on the world. Which I think we now need to obviously have a rethink about this and re-strategize ourselves so that we can see from 20 years from now, should this continue, what's going to happen, and should this stop, what benefits can we have?
Great call. Shah, thank you, sir. You outlined that brilliantly, and I think what you said at the beginning about what was going on in Pakistan as well just gives a taste of the international problem that this whole thing is. This is not about just avoiding a little bit of tax legally. You should never be paying tax to the state that you don't owe. That would be crazy. It's your legal right and, in fact, your duty to avoid paying tax that you do not have to pay. Evading tax, that becomes something else. And the issue with tax havens is that it does, I suppose, ride that line very precariously between avoidance and evasion. And that's why this issue is such a contentious one for many. I don't believe, by the way, that whilst there might be some people whose money would therefore defer back to the UK economy, I think for a lot of big corporations it wouldn't make a bit of difference, frankly, because they would find another imaginative way of losing it elsewhere. And, of course, anyone who can keep on track of the complexity of the global taxation systems in all the various residences and places and boroughs and shores, etc., is, well, I don't think we'd ever meet that person. I'm not sure they actually exist. It's almost meant to be that complicated. More calls on this coming up. 0345 6060 973. The one headline of this that should absolutely wrangle you, that should really disappoint you, that should absolutely bother you, is that our own head of state, the Queen, or the Queen's private estate, secretly invested money into one of these accounts as well. When we have our own head of state doing this, I think we're in trouble. We're in trouble in terms of our trust of the establishment, our trust of our masters, our trust of our lawmakers, our trust of our system. That puts up a big old question mark. The Queen avoiding tax. Now, I'm not comfortable with that, are you? 0345 6060 973. Still to come this evening.
The failing of democracy, low pay, 0-hour contracts, the guise of austerity. If you're not out protesting at the moment, why are you not out? Because there's so many things that you should be protesting about.
This was the Million Mask March, took place this evening down in the capital. Their themes are, and it ties in incredibly with this, anti-capitalism and corruption in politics. The serendipitous nature of this year's march can hardly be overstated. So were this group of anti-establishmentarians right all along? We'll talk about that in just a little bit as well. Plus, we cross to the United States for the latest on that shooting at a Baptist church in Texas. We'll chat to our correspondent Simon Marks in just a moment. Right now, it's a little after 10:30 and the news headlines come from Paul Smith.
At least 20 people have been killed and 30 others left injured in a mass shooting at a Baptist church in Texas. It's feared children are among the casualties after it happened during a morning worship service 30 miles southeast of San Antonio. It's reported the Queen's private estate has millions of pounds invested in offshore tax havens. The Duchy of Lancaster, which provides the Queen with an income, says all its investments are fully audited and legitimate. Conservative MP Chris Pincher has referred himself to the police and